Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the February meeting of the New York City Transit Authority Committee. We're going to do something unusual and start almost on time. Are there any public speakers?
Yes, there is one public speaker.
You know,
Murray Bowden.
It's always a voice that answers. Morning, Mr. Bowden.
Morning, everybody. I guess the good stuff first is, Tom, you need to be congratulated on the excellent way that the fast track is working out. It's just a change in the way business is done. That's excellent. I had the opportunity Thursday to take my granddaughter for the day, and we took the subway, and we used that new iPad app because I was on the train not knowing how to get from 86th Street to Bowling Green because we took the Staten Island ferry. I entered the information in there because I couldn't tell how many more stations it was on that particular line, and it worked excellently. So you've shown how we're moving forward. The next step is to get all of these people here to have a computer in front of them at the meetings. This is the book that I got today, and I wanted to get it last night, and it actually was on my iPad, but there's no way to find anything to get from one page to the next. That transition from the app that you put on here to making this available similarly where I can go from page one and touch what I need to go to so I can get there. I can't go through 200 pages easily on here. You've just demonstrated that hyperlinking works because it worked on the phone where I wanted to know where I was. I pressed it. It said the nearest station to get to Fulton Street. By the way, Michael, it was very nice. We came back through the Fulton Street station or the construction. We also saw it yesterday. I was with my wife walking around Manhattan. Manhattan's changed radically. We haven't changed here. You're still distributing the information like this. My Ardsley School District does not distribute any board materials on paper. My son-in-law works for an insurance company. None of the board materials are distributed on paper. The transition of the MTA from distributing it this way to distributing it electronically is an enormous change in culture. The thinking of the board has to change, which will lead to the thinking of these people changing. So leadership starts with you, Mark, and I use your first name because at the Port Authority, some of you have heard this before, I'm going to do this 9 times this week at 9 different meetings. At the Port Authority, I showed them the iPad, and if you look on it online, it's much better than it was in person. The vice chairman chose to use my remarks. I was one of 10 public speakers, but he chose to use my remarks, and he said, you know, Murray's remarks about going forward in the future is correct, but the point was...
Mr. Bowden, please sum up.
I've been requested to be brief today. My remarks will continue at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. The minutes from the last meeting are in the book. Does anybody have any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve them. Second? All in favor? Are there any changes to the work plan?
Well, there was actually an error in the work plan. There's just a typo that the TRB report is shown as being due in May when it's actually due in April, so we're going to submit a new page.
All right.
But otherwise, no changes.
Thank you, sir. For our operations report, this is really quite a historic moment because, as you can see from the materials, this is the highest subway use that the New York City Transit Authority has had in 60 years?
Since 1947.
Oh, that's even more. How about that? Well, congratulations to you and your staff. This is really quite a remarkable accomplishment. Mr. Prendergast.
Hold them all out wherever they were. And I believe in 1947 they used to count fares differently. If you transferred, they counted that as 2 fares, Peter. Is that correct? So it's actually even greater than that. Carmen, you want to give the operations report for Subways, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good morning, everyone. Subway performance results for the month of December and the 12-month average were appropriate are as follows. In terms of weight assessment, the 12-month rolling average for system-wide Subway weekday weight assessment was 78.8% in December. That represents an improvement of 0.9% from the 77.9 in December of 11. Terminal on-time performance for December of 11 was as follows. System-wide OTP was 84.8. That's an improvement of 6 percentage points from 78.8 in December of 10. And weekend OTP was up 1.2 percentage points from the 88.5 in December of 10. The majority of the increase in system-wide weekday OTP was due to the mild weather experienced this past December as compared to the blizzard that occurred in December of 2010. As in November, increases in weekday and late-night maintenance work required flagging protection, slow speeds, and or other major rerouting affecting some IRT routes, especially the 2, 5, and 6. A reduction in weekend OTP on the 5 was the result of significant increases in maintenance and capital construction activity. Moving to mean distance between failure, increased in the month of December at 201,628 miles. That's up 22.1% from the 165,152 in December of 2010. The 12-month average was 172,700 miles. That's up 1.5% from 170,217 miles in the preceding 12 months. Moving on to key performance indicators, system-wide service KPI was 82.8. That's up 2.4% from the 80.4 in December of 10. System-wide passenger environment survey KPI was 90.8. That's down 1.3 from December of 10. Staten Island, they don't report on a service KPI, but their PES score was 85.1, down 3.9% from 89 in 2010. I just wanted to point out before I conclude the operating report that contained in this document is also a quarterly report on elevators and escalators, and I would just like to mention a few things. Both elevators and escalator performance improved during the fourth quarter of 11 as compared to the third quarter. Monthly goals were surpassed in both areas. And the reason I want to raise this is because this is something that we really focus on. It's something that is extremely important to us and extremely important to our customers, and we recognize that we had to do something to get these, to really put a lot of focus on elevators and escalators, and I think we're starting to see some of those results. In terms of just the escalators, performance reached 96.1 availability. That's 0.9 over the goal, and it's up 3% from the third quarter result. It should be noticed that this is the highest escalator availability in 3 years. Increase in escalator availability from the third quarter to fourth quarter was most significant in the Bronx, with fourth quarter availability increasing 6.5% versus the third quarter. Elevator performance reached 97% availability. That's a half percentage point above goal, up 1.4% over the third quarter result. This is the second quarter this year that elevator availability surpassed the goal. Elevator availability increased in Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens, and Brooklyn between the third and fourth quarter. So I think we're starting to see the change that's resulting from the focus that we're putting on out there. In terms of Fast Track, I'd like to just say a few words on that. We successfully concluded our second installment of Fast Track February 13th through 17th on the 7th Avenue line between 34th Street, Penn Station, and Atlantic Avenue and South Ferry. During that period, we had over 800 maintenance workers working and actually focused on 400 different tasks that were involved over that 4-night outage. We did everything from inspect signals to replace rails, replace ties, scrape the roadbed, clean stations, paint it, relamped, just every possible thing that we can do during those 4 nights. So again, the second go-around was a success for us, and we're keeping a very close eye on this, but the results of the first 2 are extremely encouraging. And just FYI, we start the third tonight, actually, on the 6th Avenue line. That'll start at 10 p.m. tonight.
Carmen, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
The recent fast track outage, where was the work being done during that 4 nights?
The work it's everywhere. As a matter of fact, what we do is we actually lay out the limits of the outage. And in that outage, on any given night, there may be 100 to 120 different work tasks being performed in a piggyback fashion.
But would it be safe to say that the work was done south of 34th Street?
Yes. That was the beginning of the outage.
Then why was it necessary to completely suspend the number 3 line, relegating those passengers on the upper Lenox line to once again second-class status and having to ride buses when we did away with that system, several years ago under President Roberts?
I think it was just simply the ability to be able to handle that much capacity as we move the service
Couldn't it
around.
run from 148th Lenox Terminal to Times Square as it sometimes did?
I think then we would have a problem at Times Square trying to turn so much service in that area. So I think that's as simple as that.
I mean, one of the advantages that we have with Fast Track is the ability to separate totally train movements from maintenance activities. And we then focus all of our efforts at utilizing the maximum outage on that track with the resources that we have. And in some cases, we even find conditions that we have to take action on. And in this particular case, on this particular closure, on the West Side IRT, we found 2 structural beams that had to be replaced. And you normally wouldn't find those under operations where you didn't have as much access to the track. Nothing that would have resulted in a collapse, but once we found them, we knew we had to replace them. So
Where was that, Tom?
they were down south of Fulton.
So couldn't we not have run a shuttle from 148th to 135th like used to be done?
We'll take a look at it, and we'll see what we can do. And in some cases, after we put the work, what makes this program a success is, once we say this is the footprint where the track's going to be out of service, we then put a lot of people trying to coordinate and plan that work, not only materials, but people, to be able to get there and work trains. But we will take a look to see if there are ways we can minimize the impact, because it's not our desire to maximize the impact. It's our desire to minimize the impact, but it is our desire to get as much maintenance work done as possible.
I understand that.
At the end of the first quarter, we have one more line to go after the 6th Avenue line, 8th Avenue. We would like to come back and give a presentation to the board, to this committee, to give you a picture illustration overview of some of the work we've done, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, and just having 800 people on the right-of-way at one time is something I've never seen in my time here, because you just never had the ability to do that. Carmen and I have gone out on a number of these, and it's amazing the spirit of cooperation we're receiving from labor. But, when you just talk to them, it's pretty basic. I don't have to worry about looking over my shoulder, clearing up for a train. I'm going to be a lot more productive. I'm going to get a lot more work done. And so we're going to continue the efforts.
Ira, did you have a question?
I mean, I want to congratulate you on the program. I think we'll see in the long term it's very successful. But speaking of long term, on the Lenox Avenue branch, what Andrew said was very relevant. And I mean, is there no work that has to be done on that section in the next 2 or 3 years that could have been done now? I mean,
in the case,
since it was taken out, that's what I figured could have been done.
In the case of what we try to do, there's a limit with respect to the resources, not material, the labor resources, and the work trains getting the work there. And a lot of the work going on is clearing up debris that has been stored on the right-of-way for years, if not decades. And so we're literally going in with flatbeds and removing material from the system that has been around for an awful lot of time. And there's a little bit of an orchestration in terms of scheduling train movement and people on the right-of-way. But we'll take a look at it. I mean, it has always been our intention to learn from each one of these activities to see if we can minimize the impacts and shorten the amount of duration, not only in terms of time, but in terms of the amount of the system we affect.
And I remember,
it's just a shame to. I'm sorry. It's just a shame to take track out and do no work in that section, where maybe a few years from now you'd have to do it to inconvenience those people more than necessary, is what I mean.
We understand. Yeah. We understand the point, and we'll look at it. These are the first 2 that we've gotten done. This is the 3rd one we've ever done in the history of the Transit Authority.
and just to add to what Tom's saying, the planning that goes into this actually takes us several months in order to lay out and separate 800 workers so that everyone's productive, in order to get the material in there in advance of the first night's closure. There's an awful lot of logistical work that goes on in the background to make this happen.
Before Tom, we call on Cheryl for safety. I neglected to announce that our Chair and Chief Executive Officer is Joe Loda is with us. He is disguised as a reporter down there. Thank you for joining us. We're all impressed with your. We're all impressed with how quickly you've adjusted to this job and how dynamic you are and how involved you are. And thank you for joining us. Oh, Chuck, you have a question either for Joe or for.
First, I join you in the complimenting our Chief Executive Officer. You couldn't get better at the right time. I have a question that relates to a parochial concern of mine and of the gentleman to my left, the Borough of the Bronx. If you will look at pages 3.5, 3.17, and 3.19, where there are statistics involving the Bronx, the 4 and 5 trains have, those lines have, again, the worst record in the system in terms of major delays, in terms of headway. I understand you've indicated that there is construction work, particularly at Dyckman Street, that has impeded that. But we've really got to get something done here because this is a consistent event. If you take a look at the SKPI statistics on page 317, you find it as to 2, 4, and 5 again for December of last year. And finally, if you look at page 3.19, in every area, the Borough of the Bronx did not do very well. Point 3.20, we have again the worst stations in the system. I beat this drum only in the hope that you will continue to do that which I know Tom and you, Carmen, and your colleagues have done, which is pay particular attention. And so no good deed goes unpunished, but I am going to continue to beat that drum. We need to get those service in the Bronx in better shape. Those stations have got to be improved. They're awful.
I believe he's going to keep beating the drum, don't you?
It's our response. It's our responsibility to make sure we deal with and try to bring the numbers up. We have made some improvements in the area, but there's still quite a ways to go. I mean, one of the things we're looking at right now is we're looking ahead to what do we do with Fast Track once we get a year under our belt. And as you know, Fast Track has been primarily focused on Manhattan. But we have reason to believe once we work off the backlog of all the issues that we have to deal with there, we'll look at ways of expanding it to the outer boroughs, and the Bronx would be one area. It's a little bit more difficult there because you don't have as much redundant service, but that's the idea. If the principle and concept of utilizing resources in a confined area and getting maximum utilization out of them can be applied there, we can get a lot more work done. And that's what we'd like to do.
May I move to the subway fire statistics on 326 and 327? It ties with...
We're going to have a safety report. And then...
Let's hear Cheryl first.
Okay, good.
On the performance report?
You still on performance, Aaron?
Yeah.
Okay.
In what we post on the website, goals for weight assessment, which vary from line to line, and it says whether we're meeting them. I noticed that we're close on most of them except for last year. I'm talking about overall the whole last year. The G, the E, the M, the J, and the Z seem to be lagging, and not severely in weight assessment. I also noticed that this isn't in the report. This is what we show people online, and it's a similar thing. But we set goals. We show people what our goals are and whether we're meeting them. And on-time performance, we seem to be, particularly on the 5 line, terminal on-time performance, we seem to be way below goal on some other lines. Now, I have a couple of questions. Is what's our plan to meet the goal for weight assessment?
East 180th Street.
To meet the goal for weight assessment. And the second thing is the explanation why we're not meeting on-time performance, terminal on-time performance, is because we're focused on a weight assessment, and that's hurting our on-time performance figures? Or is there a way to meet, in other words, can we meet the goals this year that we're posting on the website that we show the public for every line?
He'll talk about number 5 and East 180th Street.
Okay.
But you are right. When we went to the subway weight assessment standard, there were some conscious decisions made about, in the manual intervention to deal with delays, to take a noticeable impact on terminal on-time performance for the sake of regularity in subway weight assessment. And that was a conscious decision. That was a conscious decision we shared with people, including some of our partners. And so, because one of the things we didn't want to do, if you manage to on-time performance, you may unduly impact the weight assessment for somebody in an area where there's a lot of volume loading going on and people ride in between the terminals. And that's a behavior we do not want to encourage. We want to encourage a behavior that actually manages subway weight assessment to a better degree.
But on the issue of setting the goals, I noticed that there's just a serious variance from line to line on weight assessment, and maybe that's because of length of line, but there seems to be other things going on. I don't know what they are. And just if you could address the issues with the G, the M, the G, the E, the M, and the J and the Z, they seem to be laggards in weight assessment.
Yeah, we'll take another look at that.
Okay.
But just to add to what Tom was saying, and keep in mind this is December's report we're presenting today, and it wasn't long that the track work, the signal work that went on at East 180th Street, the total configuration finished up in the fall of last year. As soon as we were, and during that process, as you could imagine, trying to run that service while we were doing such an amazing amount of work out there was challenging and difficult. No sooner did we finish up that, we had some track work that had to be done south of that station, and that work went on in December, which just further complicated it. And that work was not allowed to, could not have happened during the construction. It would have been nice once we had all the GOs if we were able to get in there and do that, but that's just not the way it was able to work. So we had to wait until the project was completed in order to make that happen. Moving on to weight assessment. In terms of customer needs, what's really important to us is to make sure that if they expect a train every 5 minutes, that we deliver on that, much more so than OTP. So our mitigation strategies that we use across the system really focus on, let's make sure there's evenness in the service. Let's make sure we're picking up our customers and doing the best we can with that. And if we have to sacrifice a little on the OTP, that's fine. We're not losing sight of that. We're just trying to get everybody in the same cultural mindset or behavioral mindset, if you will.
That's fine by me. It's just I'm looking at the website and seeing what we show the public, and also that maybe you could get back to me on how the goals are set for weight assessment. I don't care that much about on-time performance. I 100% agree with you about weight assessment. That's what I'm looking at, and I just want people not to think because on-time performance is low that's necessarily a bad thing. But weight assessment, the system goal is 79%. But you have the two line, the goal is less than 72%. So I mean, it seems to be a variance, and maybe there's a good reason for it. And I think that may be a good thing on Long Island, as opposed to the railroads, where every branch, Long Island Railroad, is set at 95.1% on-time performance, and it's trouble meeting the goal on one branch. Some branches are easier to run than others, and we're showing that here. But I'd like to know how that was. I mean, we don't have to go through it now, but I'd love to know how the goals for weight assessment.
We'll come back with a separate,
Thank
report
you.
on that and share it with everybody on the
Okay.
committee.
All right, thank you. Tom, would you like to introduce Cheryl Kennedy, or would you like me to do it for you? Go ahead.
Okay.
On safety.
Okay. Safety results were as follows. The subway customer accident rate decreased by 1.7% for the 12-month period. In the month of November, the accident rate decreased by 12.9%, moving to 2.63 per million subway customers from a rate of 3.02 last year. The employee lost time accident rate decreased 37.7% for the month of December 2011 versus December 2010. However, the rolling 12-month rate increased by 3.5% over the previous 12-month period. There were 79 confirmed fires for the month of December, down 17.7% from the previous year. Fires decreased over the last 12 months by 5.9%. 97.7% of all fires were categorized as being low or average in severity for the month of December.
You have a question, Chuck?
Yeah. If you will turn to page 3.27, if you will see that the problem under trains, right-of-way, and station are refuse and debris primarily as a causation of the fires. And you will remember that a few moments ago, our distinguished president told us that they were removing tons of that stuff that had been there for years, if not eons. My concern here is the extent to which debris is really the subject of direct focus to get it removed to avoid fires. Because here we are, we've got it as the major cause of all of the high incidence of fire.
Thomas,
But the odd thing is that you don't have refuse as a right-of-way problem, and of course in some stations it is. You have it as in stations, and you know. But
You have it on the right-of-way?
trains blow the refuse from being in a station into the right-of-way, so it
Absolutely.
probably should be listed there too.
There are a number of things that we do to really work at this issue. One is we have 2 vacuum trains that we program to run through the system, and they pick up as we try to run them every day if we possibly can.
And they go through the whole system?
They go through the system and they remove a lot of the trash, as Andrew is talking about, that blows into the tunnel areas. We also have a program where in the actual track area, in the station environment, we every 2 weeks try to get in there and clean up within the stations. So these are ongoing programs. We're making tremendous progress with the vacuum trains. I know when I first came back to New York City Transit a couple of years ago, we weren't running those trains. Those trains were sitting idle in a yard, and guess what? They're out there. They're out there now, and we're working at reliability and keeping them running. They are at the end of their useful life. We've had them for about 15 years. They're both up in age, but we're keeping them running, and they are doing the job.
Here's my concern. I know you not only share it, but exceed it. The fire in the subway can be a very, very catastrophic problem. We have an enormous amount of debris that falls into that. Put aside for half a moment as to whether or not that debris is added to by eating on the subways or the like. Put that issue to the side for the moment. There's an awful lot of it. I think, if I may, could we have a direct focus on that issue over the next couple of months?
It's not that we don't. We have. Going back 25 years, these numbers were an order of magnitude greater, and the amount of trash in the right-of-way was a lot more. If you don't deal with it in the station, it will, as Andrew says, spill to the trackway. The worst location for a fire in the system is in between stations, especially when there's a major conflagration, because you can't evacuate people, you can't even get personnel down there. The numbers where they are today are the result of a full-scale effort over 20 years to try to make sure that we're minimizing the amount of trash that lays in the system for long periods of time. Even this trash that's in the station on the trackway is generally moved within a week, if not a few days, and that's the focus. We'd love to do it as fast as possible.
What would you need to do that?
I don't think you're ever going to totally eliminate trash in the system. It's a product of the way. You don't eliminate trash in parks. You don't eliminate trash in other places. It's a matter of applying the resources in the most efficient way possible to get the trash removed on a timely basis and the debris along the right-of-way. And some of that debris is self-generated, unused track material, things of that nature. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this fast-track initiative. So I think over a period of a year, you're even going to see some of these numbers improve. But it's nothing that you can do. It won't happen overnight.
Would you be aided in that task if you had one or more additional, assuming the money was there, which doesn't sound like, one or more additional vacuum trains?
Well, we are going to come forward in the next capital program with a plan to buy an additional vacuum train, because they're a worthwhile investment to make, and we have to replace one of the ones that's extremely outdated. But those are the types of things that we're looking at for sure. And one of the reasons we categorize these fires by the level of the severity of it is because there's a whole host of issues that relate to fires. The majority of the fires can be caused by dragging equipment on a train. That's a thing of the past because of the reliability of the fleet. The amount of trash in the subway is another, and we've eliminated that. But when you see these numbers in terms of low and average, the majority of the fires are low or average, which is where we want to keep them. We'd like to eliminate all fires, but that's almost impossible. So when we see trends like trash in the trackway and the right-of-way outside of stations, the number of above average or high fires increasing, those are causes of concern because the trend's going in the opposite direction. And so far, we've been able to hold a pretty good handle on this, but it's something we look at continuously. That's why we report on it monthly.
Tom,
I congratulate you for having the courage of putting it on the table rather than trying to conceal the problem. There's a real important asset in putting it out there. My question is simply this. I've watched this number, and it has been increasing over the past month or two. And my concern is that we do whatever we have to do to get it done, and you assure us that that's being done.
We watched short trends and long trends. I believe the long-term trend has been flat or going down in terms of the number of fires.
It has been going down, as you can see, slightly down if you take a look at the full-year statistics of the 12-month total. And debris has historically been our highest category, so it's definitely, we focus on it.
You have a question?
Just several years ago, we spent a lot of time talking about the new free weekly, daily newspapers handed out in the subway stations and causing a lot of fires. Is that still an issue? Has that been under control? We spent weeks, months talking about that location.
News media of all kinds is material that is found in the subway, whether it's purchased or given away free. We are literally in the process of talking to people in London Transport about programs they have. They're joint programs by some of those newspaper distributors in terms of an ability for them to assist in reducing the amount of that material brought in the subway. And we're engaged in discussions to see what they're doing, to see if we could possibly do some of the same things here.
Do they have a freedom of the press constitutional provision in England?
Yes, I believe they do.
Okay. Anybody else for Cheryl? Ready for finance or crime? Chief Fox, how are you?
Good.
You may proceed.
Yes, sir. Am I on?
You're on.
Thank you. Thank you. Members of the MTA Board, over the last 2 decades, street crime and property crime has been reduced to historically low levels in New York City, particularly in the transit system. It's noteworthy the average number of felony transit crimes per day in 1990 was 47.9 crimes, which fell to 10.3 per day by 2001, and in 2011 we were at just 6.9 major felony crimes per day in the transit system. There's a good reason why people feel at ease using their handheld electronic devices openly while in the subway system. For the large number of people who use handheld smartphones and computers, a subway station or the inside of a train car seems an ideal place to catch up on emails, texts, play games, read e-books. At any time, at any place in our transit system, it's common to see a large number of people with their electronic devices in their hands, often seemingly not attentive to their surroundings. The first photo was, if you go back to that first photo, Vinny, that phone in the hand, that's right by an open door, as you can see. So, if that phone is snatched, the doors close, and there go the witnesses, and there go the crime scenes, and there go the victim. And the next one, Vin? And this is the red circles, electronics. The headphones are $500 headphones by that door, and at the top the man's wearing. And I mean, you can get a photo like this almost any time, any place. And as I had said, it's just the comfort level that people have in the transit system. Obviously, this has resulted in a law enforcement challenge, and cell phone thefts had been increasing steadily as smartphones began to dominate the market. These thefts accelerated in July of 2010, coinciding with the release of the pretty popular iPhone 4. In 59% of all our crimes in January 2012, electronics were taken from the victim. That's up from 42% in January of 2011. In the calendar year 2011, electronics was the property stolen in 47.8% of all our crimes, which is up from 39% in the calendar year 2010 and 35% in the calendar year 2009. Also, there was a 42% year-end increase in electronic thefts in 2011 as compared to 2010, with 857 thefts involving electronics in 2010 as compared to 1,217 in 2011. Put simply, both the number of crimes and the proportion where the theft involved personal electronics has increased. Our response hinges on the analysis and crime trends and the timely deployment of resources, which include both uniform and plainclothes anti-crime officers, including a number of special operations. When the recent class of new officers graduated from the police academy, as I had said at the last board meeting, Police Commissioner Kelly assigned 243 officers to the Transit Bureau. Those officers all assigned to our impact unit, are off to an impressive start, with a total of 4,059 enforcement contacts in less than 1 month, which include 1,034 arrests, which is an average of just over 4 arrests per officer. To supplement existing patrols, the Transit Bureau has also been allocated additional overtime to be used for crime suppression as well. In January, we deployed an average of 50 modules. A module is a team of 1 sergeant and 5 police officers per week. This month, we deployed even more officers in a targeted manner on overtime and deployed 65 modules. In addition to the previously mentioned added overtime, 320 additional officers have been assigned to 4-hour tour extensions, assigned to platforms, giving us more of a uniform presence. The increased staffing resulting from additional overtime has been utilized in a 2-pronged approach to tackling electronic thefts. The first prong, team-led enforcement, or modules, take a proactive approach into crime prevention by targeting their enforcement at locations where thefts are most likely to occur. The second prong is this extended tour platform coverage, which involves placing individual officers on platforms where cell phone snatches have been reported as a deterrent against future crimes. The department has begun to see the results of the new recruits and supplemental overtime personnel deployment. They have attempted to prevent likely offenders from even entering the transit system, and their enforcement efforts have led to an increase in the number of arrests for those that commit the crime of theft of services. The period January 1st through February 15, 2012, has seen a 23% increase in theft of service arrests compared to the same period in 2011. But even when an incident occurs, our follow-up has continued. Robbery arrests are up by 14.7%, 109 versus 95, and our grand larceny arrests, which include cell phone snatches, are up 28%, 64 versus 50. We also conduct special operations, including those using decoys. Decoy teams operate in all of our boroughs, and the specialized training of additional officers has allowed us to expand these operations. We now have 51 officers trained compared to 15 trained in early 2011. So far this year, we had 24 decoy operations with 9 arrests compared to 1 operation and 1 arrest during the same time period last year. Decoy teams are highly effective. For example, earlier this year, while looking for a wanted larcenist on the number 7 line, a decoy team observed a known criminal. The individual began to talk with another suspicious male, and they both began to ride the 7 train back and forth between Times Square and Grand Central for over an hour. The decoy team immediately notified the transit task force, which also began watching the males using their transit closed-circuit TV system. On the platform at Grand Central, the 2 suspicious males acted in concert and removed an iPod from the pocket of a male that was sleeping on the platform stairs. That incident was captured on video. The males were followed to Times Square, where they were apprehended. One man had 32 prior arrests, including 14 for grand larceny, 11 for robbery, and 6 for criminal possession of a weapon. The other had 16 prior arrests, 6 of which were for grand larceny, and both males had razor blades on them at the time of the arrest. By making decoy operations a regular tool in our crime suppression strategies, we're hoping more individuals who would snatch a cell phone take a moment to think whether the person holding that cell phone is a police officer as part of a decoy team. We've greatly increased our efforts in crime prevention through community outreach, in particular reminding people to guard their valuables and be aware of their surroundings. Since September 26, 2011, we've conducted joint crime prevention operations with personnel from our Community Affairs Bureau 3 times a week, with teams of approximately 15 crime prevention and community affairs officers. We also had auxiliary officers staging at busy locations, which continues, and fanning out along the subway platforms and the trains, handing out flyers which highlight the importance of paying attention to your surroundings. During these operations, 434,200 handouts were distributed, 378 cell phone etchings with the ultraviolet marker were conducted, and 15,900 gear guards were given out to mass transit customers. The members of our Transit Bureau remain fiercely committed to keeping our subway safe with its millions of riders every day traveling safely within this transit system. We'll continue to review and analyze our crime trends so we can take additional proactive steps as necessary. And I'd like to thank Tom Prendergast and Carmen Bianco for their support and partnership, as well as the MTA board members here today. Thank you, and I welcome any suggestions or questions.
Thank you, Chief Fox. Any comments or cross-examination? Well done.
We had Chief Fox at our recent Transit Riders Council meeting, and he and Inspector Wilcox of the Manhattan Division are just fabulous, and I know they have a handle on this, but obviously the police cannot be everywhere. We have less booths now, obviously, and so I would hope that when the time comes to take an option on the help points with or without the cameras, I would hope that you would opt for the cameras, because with a push of a button, as it was explained to us in the initial when we all got told about the help points, you can look down any platform and see what's going on, and I think it's really important that you have those kinds of eyes all over the system. So, kudos to you, Chief, and to your people.
Thank you, Albert.
But as I've told the Chief, I saw people going in through the exit slam gates. I just saw 3 in the last 3 days. So obviously, we were lucky in the case of that guy from South Carolina who didn't know how to use the MetroCard machines and jumped the turnstile and got bagged by a police officer. Thank goodness. But everybody may not be that stupid, So we really have to keep an eye on this.
Well, the help points, we're going to look at the issue. It's our preference to have them with cameras, but even if they're not, they will be made with the provision to add a camera at minimal cost. I mean, that's the idea, so. It is, but you're still limited. There's 468 stations, and there's, probably 8 to 10 help points per station. So, well, 6 to 10, so it could be.
Who has access to the film or whatever stores the visual images from the cameras?
Well, the film has access. We keep it, but the transit police have access to it.
It's film?
Well, it's video. It's electronic video. It's not film. I'm sorry. It's electronic video. It's digital. It's electronic digital video.
My reason for asking is access limited to the law enforcement entities and not to the general public?
Well, we could probably have a more detailed conversation probably in an executive session if we go too far here, but the information is available for those who have a need to it and will utilize it for enforcement purposes. That's probably the best way to sum it up for this meeting.
And Tom, if I can, there's an absolute chain of custody that goes along with anybody that touches it.
Is there anything that can be done for the sort of the next step, the remarketing of this stuff? I mean, obviously you steal it because you can turn it into cash, and how does that work? And is there any way of better blocking the resale value of this stuff?
As far as resale value, that would really be up to the providers, to the companies, but there are a number of apps that can be purchased as soon as someone gets their phone. That one of them is called Find My Phone app. And what happens is our officers are trained that as soon as they encounter a victim, we ask whether they have that app, and we take them right to a laptop or a computer or somebody's handheld, and they could actually, through a GPS type of technology, find out where the phone is. And we've had some success, and we obviously encourage people to use those apps, and we encourage our officers to inquire whether they have that app.
Chief, haven't you focused some of the enforcement action on the reselling and the fencing of the devices themselves?
We actually have in the Transit Bureau and through the Patrol Service Bureau. We're regularly doing operations when we interview a prisoner or come up with information in any form to somebody who's likely to purchase one of these phones. We call them reverse sting operations. We'll go in with teams and present a phone that we've actually, in many cases, gotten from you, Carmen, present the phone as stolen and arrest the store owners. And there's been some media in the last couple of months in some of those operations.
Just so long as you don't do it in Newark, it's probably okay. You ready for finance, Tom?
Yes.
Just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chief. Preliminary 2011 fare box revenue was $3.63 billion, $4.9 million above the estimate. The average non-student fare in 2011 was $1.64. In constant 1996 dollars, the average fare fell from $1.38 in 1996 to $1.11 in 2011.
Everyone hear that? In 1996 terms, it's $1.11 to ride the subways when the fare was $1.50 then.
Preliminary 2011 total year operating expenses before depreciation and OPEB were below the estimate by $2.2 million. Labor expenses were higher by $9.4 million due to the unfavorable timing of retiree health care, federal program subsidies, and higher overtime costs, mainly from vacancy coverage and maintenance requirements. Non-labor expenses were less than the estimate by $11.6 million, due mostly to the favorable timing of expenses and professional service contract underruns, partly offset by higher power costs. Ridership in 2011 totaled $2.31 billion, 0.2% above the estimate. Average weekday subway ridership was 5.3 million, an increase of 2.5% from 2010. This was the highest average weekday subway ridership since 1951. 2011 average weekday local bus ridership was 2.1 million, a decrease of 4.3%. And average weekday express bus ridership was 41,000, a decrease of 2.2% from 2010. Okay. Average weekday paratransit ridership was 29,000, a decrease of 0.8% from 2010. An early look at the preliminary January 2012 financial results. Total fare box revenue was $1.9 million below budget. And January 2012 operating expenses exceeded budget by $4.8 million, due largely to overtime expenses, which are under review. We're trying to find out exactly why that was. Any questions?
Sure. I am concerned about what I perceive to be potentially, at least, a self-fulfilling prophecy with respect to bus service. We've had this conversation. It seems to me that by continually cutting at buses, and I understand the financial constraints, and they're valid, but by continually cutting bus service, we are isolating communities, such as, for example, the Woodlawn area, where you and I have had this conversation. They claim to have no weekend bus service, save one line. But we've got to start considering perhaps the possibility of smaller buses for areas where there are not as many people who need that service as they have in London with the various kinds of smaller buses they use there. We've got to try and think about the idea of providing maybe a discounted fare for off-peak hours so as to encourage people back to using the buses. But it seems to me that the bus situation is really going to cause a problem because in many areas of New York, particularly the more outlying ones in the outer boroughs, absent bus service, the people are stranded. They're isolated. And I think these statistics are not encouraging at all.
Well, we're concerned as well. As you know, when we came forward to the board a couple of years ago with some of the service cuts that we had to take, given the financial situation, and it hasn't improved that much since then. For those of us that have been in the business 30 years, this is the most dire circumstances we've been under. But I can tell you that in terms of the bus service cuts that were enacted, there are probably three categories. The first category is we saw some people discontinue riding the bus and swing over to the subways, which is not a bad dynamic because it's much more efficient to carry them on the subway than it is on the bus. There are other areas that service was cut, and it's arguable as to whether or not the service was needed, although some people still used it. But there are other viable alternatives for people to use in terms of subway or other buses. And then the third category, which is where we eliminated service and there is no other viable alternative. There will be a sunny day again. There will be more money someday in the future. So we're looking at the issue of how we deal with when that day comes in terms of restitution of some service cuts that we had or feeding some of the growing services that we know we're going to have to provide additional bus service for. So it's an issue that is prime in our minds so that we'll be ready to take an action when the day changes.
Permit me two comments, if I may. The first one is, if we start to focus on some areas where small bus service, smaller buses would work, we will be able to perhaps save some money in terms of both the size of the bus and indeed even the salaries of those who drive those buses. Number two, one of the reasons that people are chased away from the use of buses is the delays that are encountered along the roads, so that if you compare the select bus service and the non-select, I'm sure you're going to find that the select bus service is doing pretty well because it gets people to where they need to get pretty quickly. Whereas in other areas, the traffic is blocked by the Department of Bicycle Transportation's use of bicycle lanes to take up half the road. And no bikes in them either. But it seems to me we need to focus on buses as an area of importance.
Daryl Irick will tell you, I mean, he's doing a very good job in terms of looking at not only the dynamic, how to respond to it, but doing things to try to improve the level of operation and the quality of the operation that's out there right now. And some of the things you mentioned certainly will be looked at. The issue of small buses is one that other agencies have looked at, and I will never tell you we're smaller vehicles that we can't do it here, but there's a critical mass that you have to achieve first. You have to have enough of them that you can actually have the a workable size fleet that makes sense, and also a maintenance facility to be able to handle them. But then when you do that, you also have to have some labor agreements in terms of a different, wage differential, because it is different to operate that bus than it is a traditional 40-foot bus. But they're all items that we're looking at.
You basically mentioned this already, but I think that you need to look at the buses together with the train service. And as we gradually improve on things like elevators and stations so that you actually have handicapped access for the trains and things of that kind, I think that it's worth thinking about whether you're supposed to be putting more resources into buses or whether you're supposed to be putting more resources into making the trains marginally more available for the bus population as a practical matter. Because obviously, yes, we have problems with congestion on the tracks, but nothing like the problems with congestion on the roads.
You're more control of your environment on the subway side. You're absolutely right. Other systems that have added rail later in life actually did a more whole-scale changing of their bus networks to support in a complementary way the rail and actually have a forced transfer because it was better and more efficient. And we need to look at some of those things, especially where we have capacity on the rail side.
Not to echo what Chuck said, but when the June 27th, 2010 service cuts came, and many bus lines were either truncated, much shorter than they originally were, or eliminated altogether, and then riders went elsewhere, and then you do a study to see who's on the buses, who's riding, it should have come as no surprise that bus ridership continually goes down. And then when you do the next seasonal bus cuts, and you see that ridership is down, so you decide to cut again. It's almost like planned obsolescence of given routes, without calling it that. I would love to see you do, not in a select bus method, but I would love to see you do a demonstration of a route by improving the service, by doing other factors, maybe making it, maybe getting those signalization optimizers for the driver. I would like you to see if ridership comes back on a given route once the service improves, all other things being equal.
As we get to a financial climate that enables us to do that, we do that. I mean, if you take a look throughout the 2000s, we added a lot of bus service in the 2000s when we were different financial, and in some cases it paid off in terms of increased ridership on the bus line. Some cases it didn't. But I don't think there's anybody on this side of the table who would disagree with you, Andrew. I mean, it hurts us to be part of a system that is diminishing bus ridership and we're cutting service. It's not something we like to do.
Are you responsible for reducing the frequency of Nassau bus, or didn't you have anything to do with that?
No, I have nothing to do with it.
Good morning. Looking at capital program results, commitments during the month of December totaled $549 million, including the purchase of 103 communication-based train control, or CBTC ready, A-Division subway cars, and the conversion of 370 R142A subway cars to be compatible with CBTC operation on our Flushing number 7 line. Also, the modification of signal control lines at another 160 locations, modernization of electronic components on selected parts of our existing fare collection equipment, and 2 MTA small business mentoring projects to address selected deficient elements at 138th Street and 3rd Avenue on the Pelham number 6 train line, and at the Fordham Road 183rd Street stations on the Concourse B&D lines in the Bronx. Meanwhile, substantial completions of projects totaled $590 million in December, including the rehabilitation of 5 more stations on the Brighton line in Brooklyn, rehabilitation of 5 stations on the Pelham number 6 line in the Bronx, rehab of 8 ventilation plants on the Archer Avenue line in Queens, and 3 projects as part of the 2011 in-house track and switch program. And also modification of signal control lines at 500 locations were completed.
Page 442, 4.41, 4.42. Quote, close out for the bus rapid transit. Fordham Road Corridor project was delayed 40 months for the replacement of first-generation refurbished fare collection machines with new machines. You waited 3.5 years just to change the collection method?
I think the closeout was delayed. I don't think the project was delayed. The closeout of the project was delayed, not the project itself. Fred? Or do you know, Peter? I believe we had functional equipment. I think it was the issue of closing out the project.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, the initial machines that went up there were repurposed machines that were originally from the subway network, and the long-term plan was to, when we implemented the M15, to use the newer technology that was better in terms of weatherproofing and things like that.
Were the buses running during that period?
Yes, the buses
No
were running.
delay in the service?
No.
Okay.
So the idea there was to use refurbish so we could at least get the service up and running while we waited for the new equipment to come in.
Okay.
Are we ready for procurement?
Steve Bochacki, if you could summarize procurements, please.
Good morning. The procurement package this month, which presents both New York City Transit and MTACC procurements, includes 9 actions totaling $10.6 million in expenditures.
Normally, this is such a small number that we throw it back and see if it gets bigger, but are there any questions about any of the procurements? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve them. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Procurements are carried. You have a special presentation now?
They're special presentations in the sense that they're in the report. We'll entertain any questions. One is the regular status report on the AFC program. The second is the 2 reports on financial plans, one for New York City Transit, one for the Staten Island Railway, that are presented in accordance with the annual budget procedures. They represent the 2012 adopted budget and February financial plan for the 2012 through 15 period. And they also reflect the inclusion of MTA adjustments that were presented in the November financial plan to the board and adopted in December 2011 by the board. The adjustments mostly represent the effects of net zero savings initiatives for represented employees, the elimination of a third-year non-represented employee wage increase, and the revised energy and inflation assumptions and new MTA efficiencies.
All right, those updates and reports are in Section 6 of the book. Does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you very much. Do we have some follow-up?
The standard follow-up reports are on the Transit Adjudication Bureau and the Service Quality Indicators and the quarterly report on the
That's
Passenger
Section 7,
Environmental Survey.
folks.
And those are just in the book for your review. That's it for New York City Transit.
Are we ready for capital construction?
Yes.
Yep.
Hello, Michael. You've been here all this time?
Yeah, it was
All right. Take it away. Oh, Chuck.
And the escalators now or later?
Might as well.
We'll do it now if you want.
Go ahead.
This is a station that I've mentioned to you before, Pelham Bay, where you have 20-year-old elevators that have people trapped in them, and you've got significant outages, page 7.29. If you go over to page 7.32, you find that you've got delays, non-scheduled outages of 70 at Bowling Green, 51 in Times Square, 28. I assume that, just look at those numbers, they are pretty substantial, and they are both as to old elevators or escalators or new ones. My question is, what is it that we can be doing, should be doing, and are doing to minimize this stuff? Because 70 outages in Bowling Green, Lexington and 53rd Street, Bloomingdale's must be getting ready to close down. 70 outages in the span of a year is a lot.
I mean, at face value, when you look at the number, yes, it in fact looks high. But what you don't see in that number is cause. And the cause on an escalator could be something as simple as children that decide to hit the emergency off switch. That would be unscheduled. We'd have to go back there and restart it. That's showing up here. So you really have to know, what we're talking about in order to understand what's embedded in that statistic. So it's not like they're down because of their reliability is off. They're down for a multitude of reasons.
But they're still down, and with the elevators, the people are still trapped.
But they're mechanical devices, and there's a safety feature built into them, so that when you hit that emergency off switch, it's there for a reason.
When we take an escalator out of service, we're a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week system. That counts as an outage. There's only 4 systems in the world left 24 hours, 7 days a week. When all the other systems that don't operate at night do that service, that doesn't count as an outage. So even the standards we have are very, very high standards, which we're committed to meeting. But they're to a standard most people don't even have to have. 24 hours, 7 days a week means we take an escalator out of service for 10 minutes, it's a 10-minute outage.
How do you have 97% use and availability anyhow? How do you get that high?
And we're not insensitive to the issue that we need to do better. And as Carmen said, since we made the management changes about a year ago, we have seen a steady increase in the reliability and the downtime of escalators. And it's our desire to be able to, even on some of these outages we did in terms of the line closures, we were doing escalator and elevator repair work at Brooklyn Bridge, for example, and at Bowling Green that we couldn't do without, a major outage such as those 4 nights in a row.
By the way, this committee's questions about a year ago about the reliability and availability of escalators and elevators led to this management change. So don't think that what you do here is not listened to by management, because this was a significant change in operations, by the way.
Very close attention is this common. My suggestion is this. Perhaps in the future, if it is feasible, we separate off outages that are these momentary things where a kid hits the button or the like from those that are out for 12 hours, 18 hours, and the like, where it becomes serious.
We can do that. We can take a look at the statistics.
Excuse me, I'm a little confused about the statistics then. When it says percent availability, that's not an outage, that's a time out. It's time that it's out. And when you look at the percentages of availability, that's a percent of the 24 hours that it's available. So that really tells us that's the number we should be looking at, not necessarily total number of outages.
There's any one of a number.
I mean, that's
just about any performance measure we have. You want to take a look at a number of things.
Right.
Because one of the advantages of taking a look at number of outages, if we're having a high degree of vandalized actions, we may want to put a resource at that station, at that escalator, because it could seriously present a problem for us in terms of volume at the station or a safety issue for somebody semi-ambulatory. So all of the measures are valid and worthwhile. It's a matter of in what context they're viewed. But in terms of total impact on customer, its availability is probably
that's the key. If you want to talk about impact on the customers, you get 98%, but there were 20 outages. That means someone's hitting who knows what it is, but it means that we're doing a good job. Is what I'm trying to say.
We spent a lot of time.
And the other thing's the manage. I know.
No, I'm saying we spent a lot of time trying to put these reports together. I don't know. It was probably before you were here. It's actually the report triggered from a 5-page New York Times story. It was very difficult to see which data we wanted, and then if you see, we even got into explanations of entrapments, because we thought entrapment, if someone's in there, we want to see exactly what it is. So in trying to determine which data to select, I think everyone's right. I just want to remind, there was a lot of time spent to try to figure out what to collect and what not to collect.
I like all the data, But I'm saying when you look at, I'm just reminding, when you look at it, you have to understand what you're looking at and what you're interpreting. When you're talking about impact on the passenger, you could look at the percentages and you could interpret the other outages as an important thing too. I just want to make sure when we have the discussion here, and Commissioner Myrtle understand, we all understand that also there may be a time for a few months when you have a very low number and then it comes back up again, and that's something that, because of maintenance or whatever will happen. Thank you.
Fred?
Further to Mr. Merdler's observation, perhaps, Tom, it would be useful to break out in a qualitative way, pick a few categories, what the reason for the outage is. Gives us a better understanding of whether it's vandalism or a system failure.
Do that.
Thanks.
Michael, did you finish or even start? I remember you being introduced.
No, I didn't start yet. Okay. Bogdan? Okay. Just a brief summary of a couple of the projects. We'll start with Fulton Street Transit. And these are recent pictures as of a couple of days ago. This is the oculus, and that's being cladded. The curtain wall installation, that is the glass, is started, and that's going to continue for the next few months. So as you walk by, you're going to start seeing actually the transit center taking its rightful place in lower Manhattan. This is the Day Street Concourse. We have installed the tiles. Now we are actually about to start the installation of the walls, and that will start as they're being manufactured. The Day Street Head House, this is just across the street. The glass in most of the location is in place, and that will continue. In fact, we have some additional work that is going on at the 4-5 Fulton Street Station. This is on the north side where we expect to open up a refurbished entrance in the spring of 2012, as well as some of you may see the reinstallation of the historic glass tiles along the platform of the 4-5. I just would like to move to the 2nd Avenue project. This is, just to get a sense, this is a form that we are using for the concrete operations. The concreting on the west tunnel, that this is going on 2nd Avenue downtown, will be on the right-hand side, has been completed, and then we are now completing the east tunnel. It's about 65% complete, and this is the type of equipment. We also have specialized equipment for the waterproofing. Clearly, that comes before, and then we're installing the reinforcement and follow up by that other machine. At 72nd Street, just as a point, we are actually continuing our blast operation. The cavern is by now quite large, and we are about 70% done, a little over 70%. We expect to complete the blasting in the cavern sometimes by the end of May. Well, if you go down and you do not know, if we lowered it without knowing where you start, you may think you're in Wyoming. But actually, I'm going to move away from this for a moment. This is the entries 2, and it shows the progress of the construction facing north. Just another couple of issues here. 86th Street cavern mining is actually will start soon. We are manufacturing now the new mucking conveyance and hoisting system that will be installed in 2 locations again. They will right now undergoing testing off site, so we will see how they are going to be working out for us. The work at 63rd Street actually is moving along. This week we are actually going to finish the western tunnel
that will actually break through into the 63rd. So this was the last couple of hundred feet were shoot and blast rather than TBM work. So that will be completed as well. We expect to, we started and we awarded the systems contract, so that's actually, it's on, and we expect to be able to open and award the first contract for finishes at 96th Street, clearly subject to budget availability at the end of the month. I guess that concludes the work on the 2nd Avenue and Fulton Transit. The number 7 line extension, the work continues. The running tunnels and station structures will be completed in April. I will have substantial completion. And the various sites, L, J, and K, the work is continuing. Again, we expect to have a bid opening for Site P, and that will be is expected in March with a notice to proceed in June 2012. That's it.
How did you, on 7 line, have substantial completion in September 2013 and revenue service in June 2014? How did that happen?
The construction will be completed, the physical construction is September 2013, and the work that needs to be done for testing and acceptance of the system, it starts earlier than that and will continue. And at this point, I think that our plan shows that it may actually go as far as, and if you look at our contract actually with the system contractor anticipated the potential that will go to June 2014. This is, at that point, is really an acceptance of the system and the testing that it's a very complex, is a new thing, is an extension of an existing line. It's even in many ways potentially more complicated than the 2nd Avenue that actually is totally new. So that is being worked hand in hand with the transit people. We have put in a bonus, a completion bonus, hoping that the contractor will be able to accelerate work. It does not seem that at this point it would be appropriate for us even to consider that due to the amount of money and the potential risk of not being able to do it.
But you think at least we will be able to ride a train from one end to the other before the end of 2013?
Tom, would you like to answer that? Because I don't run trains. Before the end of... Well, that's the intent, but I mean, the systems work and the testing and commissioning, every time I've been associated with them, they're serially done. They're not concurrently done. They're consecutively done. And in some of these tests, you can't start the next one until you complete one. So the desire would be to do that, and we'll do everything we can. But the dates, as Michael put them, at this point in time are the dates that are the most realistic. We're a good year and a half, over a year and a half away from that December 2013 date, and a lot can happen between now and then.
We don't want Bill de Blasio to ride through in the first subway, do we? Unless it's absolutely necessary.
I would hope that we can do better than the June 14 date in terms of revenue service, which is being totally complete at that point.
It's our intent. I mean, we would love to do it. But, I mean, some of the most difficult issues in terms of testing and commissioning are the fan plants, the ventilation, the signaling system. And in order to do the testing and commissioning right, we got to make sure we do them right. We just don't want to shortstop those. We just can't afford to do that. But the intent is to get it done as soon as possible.
Quick question. How many stations do you contemplate adding once this is completed?
It's one station at
11th Avenue?
That's correct.
That's the only station?
That's the only station.
Okay. Any further questions for Michael? Do we have anything else on our agenda, folks?
I don't believe so.
Anybody have any new business? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.
Thank you, sir. No, it was fine. Yeah, I mean,